So, I'm going to tell you a little story about me. As a little girl growing up, people closest to me would say that I was sensitive. It was a negative. I didn't understand that. Crazy how people do that. I was connected to how I was feeling, and I could express myself easily, and I was told that emotions were a sign of weakness. I thought that was crazy, because I watched my little brother flip around emotions left and right, and guess what? That kid got everything he needed. And I thought to myself, that's pretty powerful. So emotions are not a weakness. They're actually powerful. Emotions influence our perceptions, our decision-making, even our memory. So one of the most important things to understand about emotions is they connect people, places, and different things, including products. How many people feel good when they pick up their Apple laptop? You're connected to it emotionally, I bet, right? So the point of view I have here is I believe everybody in this room can actually increase customer satisfaction. I think you can increase the way people feel about their products, and I think you can actually move the bar on selling products if you simply tap into the way people feel about them, not just about what they know about them, okay? So I want you to consider tapping into emotions to make products more relatable, create stronger connections, and even get that engagement going. It's possible. So why do emotions matter? Emotions matter because products become more relatable, value becomes transparent, and it fosters that connection that I was just talking about, and people become more engaged and curious. I'm going to show you a little video. This is a video you might have seen already on YouTube, but I think it really demonstrates how we can change things with design. You guys can hear that, right? Did that get anybody in the gut? So I think that's a perfect example of how emotion can help us relate. So people are enlightened and begin to connect, and curiosity and engagement naturally result. Remember, emotions can change our perceptions, and they make us remember things that over time we tend to forget if it's a fact, right? So anyone who has, think about the moments that you've been sitting there in your office. Like, has anyone had to put their work on the wall and have it critiqued? Like, remember that feeling of sweat and anxiety? It's just pretty bad, right? That's what I'm talking about. You never forget that, right? You'll go in 30 years from now and you'll be sitting in a boardroom, and that moment that when you were 21 and had that first critique, you were like, ugh, it's still real. So Emotions help us remember things, and if we could tap into that and really have our emotions, remember the really good things about a product, why not do that? Emotions can change our perspective. Here's some stats that are pretty interesting. Emotions dominate decision making, and how we use design with emotion is really important. They could play a big role in how we increase our sales. So the very first one, I tapped into something that was about just content. Because design, in my opinion, has three very, very distinct areas. There's content, there's interaction, and then there's actually the visual presence of a design. So those three, and I would actually include motion in there as well. So there's really four, but I'm going to put motion under visual for a second. So when we talk about content, campaigns with emotional content did twice as well as those with rational content. There was a study done on that. And that's pretty interesting, because the way most companies approach any kind of product is through fact, right? And if we just saw that video and you saw how if we just switched it up a little bit, you can get a real reaction. And what we're aiming for here is curiosity. We're aiming for confidence. We're aiming for words like that. The second one here is a 2016 Nielsen study that found that ads that prompted a strong emotional reaction actually had a 23% bump in sales. Think about that. Just because they got a reaction. How can you use emotion to get a reaction? Oops. Sorry, I skipped over the third one. The third one I thought was interesting because this was back in my era. Apple introduced the casing. They changed the casing of their computer back in the day. And they made it, they put colors on it, they changed the shape of it, but the actual computer in that module was the exact same model of a computer that was not selling well. They tapped into those emotions. They tapped into what was appealing to people. They tapped into what made people feel good about computers, and their sales boomed. Brilliant, right? So how do we get emotional in our digital experiences? One, identify the moments that matter. These moments are moments that it's not a flow, we're on to the next flow. It's the point in an experience that makes somebody stop and pause and think and go, right? So as an example, I think I had one here. It's when you learn about a product and then you stop and go, that's nice about that product, but what is it going to do for me? That's a moment right there where if you capture them at that moment and you have an emotion at that moment, you can actually move the bar. The second thing is discover the emotions that people may feel in that moment. Do they feel anxious? Do they feel confused? Do they feel curious? You want to take the negative emotions and try to push them to the positive emotions. So if they're feeling, skeptical, how about getting them curious? Consciously think about that. And I had my team actually do that. It's not as easy as you may think, but use your research too. Usability studies are great. You can watch people, their faces, while they're looking at something, they're like, oh, it's great, and they're giving the kind of crazy little face there, and you're like, oh, I don't think they think it's that great. Okay. The third step here is brainstorm what's needed to support the emotion in each one of those. If you want people to be curious and you have a very flat, boring, words that just aren't getting people curious, you got to switch it up. So find those moments, discover what emotions they're having or what emotions you want them to have. And then look for the types of things that are going to support that emotion and insert those into your designs. It may be interaction. It may just be language. It could be motion. It could be any of those. So really, and the other thing there is, I always tell my team, there's three things that you really have to be worried about. Not worried, you should be thinking about. content is king. Interactions are great and they will help, you move the person along. And then that visual, the hierarchy of visual, the intent of color, all of those things you should be looking at through the emotional lens. Because if one doesn't map to the same emotion that you want people to move towards, your design's going to be a little confusing for people, okay? So we ran this through, and this is typical. I'm not, the designers that worked in this, they did a great job. They used the components that were there, but they were not mindful of emotion. So what happened here is we ran this through a usability test. We started to understand what some of the words that people were thinking about. Disinterest, boredom, confusion, skeptical. Go back to the three steps that we had. Are those the emotions we want for this? Absolutely not. So I said to the team, all right, here's your job. Go spend a few minutes, evaluate this page, use the same components, change it up, make it emotional, and sketch it out. You got 10 minutes, let's go. They looked at me like I was crazy. The point of doing that was I wanted them to do it rapid. I didn't want them to sit there and think and dwell and go back and forth on things. I wanted them to very quickly pull this up. So they came back with an example, and I said, nah, not so good. Go back, get another 10. So after a couple rounds, we landed here. We started with the why at the very top, right? Why do people even care? They care because they want to live confidently every day. Okay, curious, right? We got people curious at the top. Grow your retirement savings every day, guaranteed. Provide yourself dependable paychecks for life in retirement. We're trying to get across that they can take care of themselves, that they'll feel good about it, that things are going to happen for them. Compare that to the copy over here. How this works. So then we went with the product name, TI Traditional Annuity. It's an annuity, let's call it that. People are bored by annuities. It's an annuity, guess what? How it works, we'll pop a video and people can learn that. But then we get down into the next piece. We tone down the graphics so your eye doesn't bounce from the header to here. It actually starts to have a little bit of motion in the middle. Money grows guaranteed, dependable income for life. This is my favorite one. Over here, exclusive benefits. I felt like, wow, am I in a country club or something? Woo! It's actually just that TI shares profits. That's a big thing. Tone down the visuals so that the links are there if people want them, but we popped up the other things. So what we were trying to do here is really just get people to gain comfort, be worry-free. We're hitting at that, hey, look, you can trust us, you can be confident here. The last piece, which I thought was funny, is down here is an engagement piece. On that side, see your monthly lifetime income payment now. What does that even mean? I don't even know what that means. How about just calculate your monthly retirement? Invite them in. Don't make them run out and try to figure out what you're trying to do to get them to engage. Invite them in, be clear. So the difference between the two, we were running it by a bunch of people. We got upper management so excited by just knowing that if we just tweaked the bar. Now keep in mind, the rules were, you got to keep your components the same. And so figure out how to get it emotional. All they did was change content in a few tweaks to the visual. We could do that so quickly. So the difference between the two, we were running it by a bunch of people. We got upper management so excited by just knowing that if we just tweaked the bar. Now keep in mind, the rules were, you got to keep your components the same. And so figure out how to get it emotional. All they did was change content in a few tweaks to the visual. We could do that so quickly. Words fuel emotions. You just saw a good example of that. Interactions bring comfort and delight to experiences. So how do we not only use the words, but how do we actually use interactions to help talk about what we want to support here in our stories? I'm going to pull up This is an isolated design that we're working on. And so you're going to see a kind of little, it's just an isolated button. What we have been working on is trying to get people to gently go into transactions and not have a big shocking, disruptive kind of mode. We're really working with the cognitive load that a person has. When you click from a page to a page and it stops and it redraws the page every time, your brain actually has to stop and recognize what has happened. So what we've noticed is that by doing that, you're actually stopping and starting a person's, function. And so we're trying to eliminate that. So if you could actually do interactions where it morphs, it's comfortable, there are little indications of how things happen so that you know where you are. It keeps you oriented. You then, well, wait a second, we'll do 5 million because didn't he say we were going to have 5 million? How many zeros do I get there? There we go. And then, give somebody, see the transitions? Those transitions are very easy for folks to, on the cognitive load. Give them indications to let them know that they're confident. And then at the end, this is the reward. So find the moments in those experiences where you can actually move them emotionally along. So what we looked at in this experience was we looked at the cognitive load. How do people flow through these things comfortably? Give them the little cues that let them say, oh, okay, great, this is awesome, it's working. And then at the very end, give them a reward. And they walk away feeling what? Happy, feeling good, feeling confident that what they just intended actually happened. I wanted to show you this example because this is an example of a combination of words and video. When you see these words, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. It's okay. Like you're curious, right? You're a little curious. The minute you add a visual to it, it pops. Doesn't matter whether you like it or not. It just does something for you. You're like, oh, you know what I mean? So be mindful of that. Be mindful of icons, photographs, things like that. How do you use those pieces to enhance what you want to say and collectively have some kind of emotion? The products, if you do this, the products become more relatable. The value of the product and the value of what you're trying to do becomes transparent, allowing people to connect to it, and then people will naturally be more engaged. Emotion is power. And I'm going to leave you with this because I think this is amazing. Maya Angelou's quote, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's emotional design.